think that, while we're in classes with the guys most of the time during the week, one of the things we're able to do here is we're actually able to interact with them. And well, once you get to meet somebody in person, talk with them in person, the communication bandwidth increases. So this has been great. The people that I've met that are also trading, that I'm also in the Rebel Pit with, and we are exchanging text messages back and forth. The camaraderie is just excellent. So I recommend anytime they have an in-person event, you got to come and attend.
Join us this December in Miami, Florida for Market Rebellion Live.
We're a little late.
We're a little late. Yep. I don't know whether I should blame our video ninja or Jared.
I say we blame Jared.
Sure, throw me under the bus.
Yeah, why not? Folks, Jared is our producer, and he's the guy in charge of all the graphics that you see. The only thing that Jared doesn't do about the show is this.
There's only one.
There can only be one. But thank you for joining us today for the Rebel's Edge, the last Rebel's Edge of the week. Maybe we'll put up some tweets about the fabulous spread that Loopy and Pete will be putting out up in Minnesota. And I just said, Pete, that last week I was broadcasting at this time from the boat.
Yeah.
And this week I'm here in the cold because, it's not exactly warm and sunny in Chicago. Instead, it's cold and sunny. But at least we got back to 40 degrees. So that's something.
Well, we haven't sniffed 40 degrees in about a week here, and I only have been back a couple of days, but it's been freaking awful. You know what? It is amazing, John. Your body does adapt so quickly, and I am a Floridian at this point in time. Shoot, it is where I live, and this is my vacation home. So I have to look at it
audio
that way,
capture
and now it feels
not
like
registered.
I'm going to Utah or something. I could go skiing maybe at Afton this weekend or whatever. I think the snow will be down. I got snow outside right now, I can tell you that.
Oh, yeah. Well, folks, as you know, we only do 1 minute of macro here on the Rebel's Edge. Then we give you our top 4 business stories of the day, whether we think that's bullish or bearish, whether we buy it or sell it, and then some unusual activity in sports. So let's get started, Pete. 1 minute macro. Start that clock, Jared.
Start it and stop it.
The national median monthly payment for a mortgage was at a new record, Pete, because obviously people have paid higher interest rates in the past, but houses weren't as expensive in the past. Now, the average mortgage, Pete, was $2,012 from October. That's up from September, $1,941, and it's up 45% year over year. That's an amazing statistic right there. That's my 1 minute macro.
I'll jump on it for 2 seconds then, John. Macro, I think you're 100% right. That's why people started to finally focus on that today, and I think that's why, despite the fact that we were up 100 points not too terribly long ago in the markets, I think it's why people are getting to the reality of it, and it's getting squished down a little bit. So we'll see how this plays out. But I'll tell you what, the mortgage markets, we talk about debt all the time with credit cards. We also talk about mortgage itself. Those are issues, and people are levered to the hilt. It's brutal right now.
Yep. $629 higher in the last 10 months, folks, for mortgages. And again, that's the median monthly payment. All right, let's talk about biz activity, Pete, because
SWB audio capture not registered.
In November, new orders were dropping to the lowest level in years. And that's not good when you're looking at how businesses are doing. Pete just spoke to consumers and whether, they can afford these higher interest rates and things. And businesses are cutting back like crazy, Pete.
Yeah, it's the contraction, John. I mean, it really is. It's something you look at PMI under 50 and it's starting to get a little bit further under 50 all the time. I think the combination of that, you and I are already talking about interest rates, but there is that slowing demand. And that's something that I think we all have to embrace right now, is have the understanding of what we are dealing with right now. Everybody wants to throw out the roses and say, all this is great. Yeah, we've had a nice bounce. We've had some moves here and there, but I'll tell you what, I still think, John, there is a lot more going on in the big picture. And a lot of it has to do with rates. And a lot of it also has to do with the crunch down as far as demand goes right now. It's much more difficult than everybody's been talking about.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday, even with Dollar Tree, Pete,
Yep.
and things like that. Yeah, people are trading down to save money, but they're not necessarily going to Dollar Tree,
No.
like we said yesterday. All right, what about Manchester United? And not just because of FIFA, Pete, but perhaps there's more focus on these stocks because many of them are publicly traded. Man U, that's the symbol, MANU, was up big yesterday. It's up big again today because people think the Glazers might actually consider selling it. And I think they'd be idiots not to at least consider it, Pete. They're in at 850 mil or something like that. And the thing has a value probably north of $3.5 billion.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable, great investment. Once again, it's not quite Jerry
SWB
Jones,
audio
John. I mean, you
capture,
go back in time
not
to Jerry
registered.
Jones, 1992. I'll never forget it. He decides he's going to buy the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody said, "You're a fool. What are you doing, man? You're paying $120 million for this football franchise? You're nuts." Well, now it's worth about $7.5 billion, maybe $8 billion. So I think Jerry's not as stupid as these morons that were calling him an idiot were. But when you look at what's going on, John, when you look at Man U and you also look at Fenway and what they're doing and the possibility that they might sell as well, there is something to be said for this. Is this the Ted Lasso effect? Maybe it is, because when you look at these, they paid $350 million in 2010, John. I'm talking about the Fenway Group. And, with Liverpool, what do you think that's worth? We're looking at Man U, and I'll tell you what, $3 billion plus is what I would say for both. These are some great investments. The Glazers also, for people who don't know it, they're attached to me because those guys own the Buccaneers, baby.
Yep. And, this might also be a reason, Pete, that they don't want to have to buy a new stadium,
right?
Finance a stadium. I don't think people over in the UK are nearly as rabid, willing to use taxpayer dollars to build a new stadium for their local team. There's number one, there's a ton of them. And number two, I think they figure, you're a billionaire, build your stadium. And, over here, we have supported a lot of these stadiums being built with our tax dollars, despite the fact that it's a private enterprise. It's not really a public partnership, except for maybe Green Bay, Pete.
Yeah,
all right.
But they do drive money, John. They do. I mean,
for
instance, with the Vikings here in Minnesota, when they decided to build that stadium, part of it was they want to keep the team here, right? I mean, that's something that everybody wants to do, and we've seen a lot of teams that bounce all over the place,
audio capture, not
I think
registered.
That's something that they may have to embrace it as well, John, because those fans are rabid. And I think if you pulled the fans, they'd actually probably be okay with some sort of a tax that would allow them to be able to help out the ownership, because you know what? Those things do cost a heck of a lot of money. You and I both know it. I mean, these stadiums go anywhere from well over $1 billion to a couple of $1 billion to build those out. So there is something to that. And I would think that as rabid as those Ted Lasso types are, they're going to want to have a brand new, beautiful stadium.
Oh, yeah. And I think you do hold on to shares here. Yep. It was 27 or 28 bucks, Pete.
Yep.
Man U was, and it came all the way down to 10 this July because people aren't happy with the ownership and so forth. But now it's pushing, back towards 20. And I would certainly hold on. I think if they decide to sell, Pete, it's going to be in that $20 to $25 per share range, which would put the franchise north of $3.5 billion. All right, let's talk about John Deere. We've talked about how people have, because of the sanctions, paid a lot more for food all over because Russia and Ukraine produce about 25% of global grain exports. And right now, a lot of that is not getting out or it's certainly tied up for a long time before it gets out, Pete. So John Deere, farmers and things like that, a little flush with cash. That's not me ripping the farmers. That's just saying, hey, you've got supply and demand factors working now. The demand is still the same and the supply is down. So that means prices up, farmers doing better. They can spend more for John Deere, Pete.
Yeah, well, I'm in my John Deere outfit today, John, up here in Minnesota. I got my flannel on. I'm ready to rock and roll. I could get back on top of one of those big old John Deeres. I got a John Deere in my garage
audio
right
capture,
now.
not registered.
But I will tell you this. They have themselves in a great position right now. It's why they crushed it on the earnings, John. They crushed it on the revenue as well. Higher crop prices, that's actually a really good thing. That actually gives the farmers a lot more, as you just said, cash to be able to buy some of these unbelievable pieces of equipment that they've got to. John, it's millions of dollars that these guys have got to spend for these big, huge tractors, the combines, and all the rest of it. It is a lot of money that they have to invest, but right now is a great time for them to do that, and that's why they're purchasing these. Demand is there, as you said, and there's probably not quite enough right now. So the farmers have the spending power. When they've got that, that's a great thing. Earnings, John, at 744. They were looking for 709. That gives you almost everything right there. They're crushing it right now at John Deere.
Yep, sure are. And my hat's off to them because that's an Illinois-based company,
Yeah.
Pete. We've got Moline and Peoria, Caterpillar and John Deere, both here in Illinois. All right. What about Unity Software, Pete? This is one where shares were down hard. They were down over 70 some odd %. But you know what? Yesterday, Pete, we had some unusual activity in there. There you see it on the screen there. Jared just popped it up.
Nice.
That's some of the unusual activity. What were they doing? Buying upside calls that expire Friday. So that was pretty well timed, Pete, because for whatever reason today, all of a sudden the stock, people started noticing that, hey, this thing's down 70%. Maybe we should grab some.
Yep. I think you're exactly right, John. And they went for those calls, obviously some of the stock as well, because we're having a nice move to the upside. But the most interesting thing and what I pulled away from this is just a couple of days ago, and I always want to give these guys, the credit that they deserve when they deserve it. And Stiefel deserves it
SWB audio capture,
they were at a
not
target
registered.
price of 30, John. They raised it up to 40. And they've got a buy rating right now on this. And the stock is making a nice move. We've got that option activity as well. So maybe this is the time for Unity to make a nice big move to the upside. I know this name well. You do as well. And this is something that our good friend Gene Munster, who's going to be in Florida with us in Miami at the early part of December. This is one of the names that he covers, and he's talked about it at great length about all the good things that they do have working at the company. So will it continue the upside? Maybe. We hope so. But we're seeing that unusual option activity and the fact that stock absolutely has been hammered, but now it's starting to turn around and it's looking pretty good today.
Yep. Interactive 3D technology with this software, folks. So it's basically a big competitor to the likes of Autodesk and some of these others. So I like Unity on this bounce, Pete, and I think the bounce continues.
Yeah.
All right. Let me give you Warner Brothers Discovery as my unusual activity today.
Nice.
If you're just joining us for the first time, unusual activity means that we see big buyers coming in. Buyers, my hands are pulling towards me. That's what a buyer does. They're buying upside, in this case, upside November 37 calls that expire this Friday. They bought 1.5 million share equivalent because 15,700 of these calls changed hands this morning on a holiday shortened week. They bought 15,000 of these. They obviously think between now and Friday, something could pop. And that's why they're buying them. And they're only paying like 20 cents for these calls, Pete. So that means $20 a piece for each option, because every option's for 100 shares. So they could, for a 1,000 share position, they could spend as little
SWB
as
audio capture, not
to
registered.
be in this thing from now till Friday, Pete. There's a lot of people that'll put much more than that on a football game. And this one, maybe you've moved the odds into your favor a little bit better than a football game. I like the trade. Warner Brothers Discovery, upside calls with the stock, the December 11 calls with the stock trading basically 11.21.
Yep, I like it as well, John. But I'll tell you what I really do like. We were talking about semiconductors yesterday, and we were talking about unusual option activity in the semiconductor world. Well, roll the tape, Jared. Semiconductors were up 1.5% last I looked. And when you go across all those names, you look at the Microns, the Qualcomms, and all these names moving to the upside. I got one for you. How about NVIDIA, NVDA? This one, John, is really pretty interesting because of the size and the short time frame these guys are coming after. This is already, we've gotten into the week. It's Tuesday. These expire by the end of the week.
Wow.
Those calls, John, they hit a pretty nice number today. As a matter of fact, they were a little over $9.50 today with the stock making a really nice run. Got up over 165 today, just to give people a little bit of an idea. It's pulled back a little bit, but 10 minutes into today, John, they decided they wanted 9,100 more calls. And as a matter of fact, they expire on Friday as well. That's November 25th. The 162.5 calls. They were going anywhere between, call it close to $1.50, almost up to $2. So if you had any inkling to get involved yesterday, you got to be disciplined, number one. But somebody's back today saying, you know what? We think this thing makes another move. Maybe it's already made that move, because this morning that stock was trading about 162, John, at the time of these calls that were being bought at the 162.5 strike. 9,100
SWB audio capture not registered.
Will it jump back up again from here? We'll see, but I'll tell you what, we love what we're seeing there. We saw some activity in AMD. We saw some activity in Marvell. We've seen it in the SMH. They are buying calls in the semiconductors.
Yep, I agree, Pete. I think this is a situation where, number one, great call by you, and the team made a great post when they said, hey, you know, the stock was trading basically 154.5, I think, or something like that, Pete. Mm-hmm. And they were saying, hey, they're buying the 155 calls, the at the money call. What are they buying today? Like you said, 9,100 more of the at the money 162.50 calls. So, you know, this gives you 2 bites of that apple. And by the way, that apple, folks, went from $2 where they were buying them yesterday to $10 today. And let's say that, you know, you're somebody who's watching us and saying, yeah, but I'm not a subscriber. By the time you guys talked about it, those calls were already $3.50 or $4. Okay, fair call. If you're not a subscriber, you don't get quite the same timeliness that our subscribers get. And sometimes that's a benefit to you, because it doesn't mean they always go straight up from that moment. Sometimes they flutter around and you can even get in cheaper. But what I will point out is that the people that were in it yesterday, and it closed at $6, Pete, yesterday. Yeah. So if you got in at 4 and you were complaining and it went to 6, I got to scratch my head. And if you got in at 4, it closed at 6, and then this morning early it got to 10. I don't know how you complain about that. That's like a gift from the trading gods. That's your Thanksgiving right there.
There it is. That's a fun turkey, John. Hey, speaking of that, let's jump to the Thanksgiving turkey NFL game of the week, or is it games of the week?
SWB audio capture not registered.
This is what we've got in front of us. By the way, a salute to John Madden, passed away just a year ago. Austin, Minnesota, born and raised. Let's not forget that. You know what? I always got to pub up our Minnesota, John. So we kick off the day. You got Buffalo at Detroit. Now, Detroit's always a host. It's always kind of fun. John Madden used to have so much fun with this whole thing. Buffalo at Detroit. Why is this one interesting? Well, because the Detroit Lions have only won 3 games in a row. They beat the Packers, they beat the Bears, they beat the Giants, and they're on an absolute roll. And, John, they are turning the ball over defensively. They had 3 turnovers against the Giants. They also had 3 interceptions against the Packers. That was Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball. And I'll tell you what, John, what do you think, by the way, of that game? I'm going to go through 3 of them. We got 3 big games. What do you think of that game? Because can Detroit stay with them for a while?
Well, first of all, Pete, those are the friendly confines. That's a Wrigley term, of course, but those are friendly confines for the Bills. Why do I say that? because they went there last week.
It's
because
their
they
home
couldn't
stadium.
play in Buffalo. So, this is going to feel like a home game for those guys. And they probably don't mind. I mean, a lot of cold weather teams like Buffalo do have an edge. The Vikings used to have that edge when they played outdoors. The Packers still have that edge, but they're not going to make the playoffs this year. When you play outdoors and it's sucky weather and things like that, that causes the other team's focus to be distracted a little bit because they start thinking about how cold they are. Am I going to pull a muscle? Am I going to slip if I cut too hard and all that kind of stuff? But, Buffalo's coming back into that dome. And I got to think, Pete, that they're pretty happy about that since they were just there a week ago, just 4 days ago. So I think this is like a home game for them.
SWB audio capture, not registered.
Like, young kids instead of being out there in the cold worrying about pulled muscles.
All right. So of the next two games, John, you're going to have to tell me which game you're looking forward to more. And you'll be here at the house, so we'll be flipping around on the dial and checking everything out. Giants at Dallas. Now, they both are 7-3. We talk about the NFC East all the time. Here's why Dallas, in my mind, might blow them right out of that Texas stadium. They got the number one defense in football. They proved it last week when they got another 7 sacks. They lead the NFL with sacks, and they get after it. I'll tell you what, the Giants have given up 30 sacks already this year. So that's a bit of a problem, I think, for the Giants. So you've got the number one defense. You're the number one scoring offense, or number 7 scoring offense with Dallas. And then you look over at the Giants. John, this is an interesting thing. They're 7-3, but their point differential is 1. In other words, they've scored 1 more point than they've given up points so far this year. It tells you a lot about the fact that they're squeaking by in games. They're not only squeaking by in those games, but they're very, very close games, and they've managed to win a few of those. I don't think that happens against Dallas. I think Dallas might blow these guys out. And you've got a similar interesting game, New England at Minnesota, right here in our backyard. We're not going to go because it's too big of a pain in the butt. But what makes this one interesting, John, is the Vikings are a good team. They've played pretty well. But New England has that same sort of a thing that Dallas has. They've got 44-point differential. They score 44 points more than their opponents. And I'm starting to wonder, the Vikings defense showed who they really are, like you and I have talked about for weeks. The defense isn't very good. The offense has been carrying them. I don't know. Which game do you think is a better game, and which game do you think? What are your picks on both
SWB audio capture,
first of all,
not
Pete,
registered.
That New England game was just crap. New England Jets, that thing sucked. It was terrible. It was just sack after sack, both sides. Both sides. The Jets with one of the best defenses in football, as we've said many times, and New England, they both just sacked each other back and forth, and it was a terrible football game, I thought. So I'm not excited about seeing them go up there and play the Vikings, which, depending what Viking team shows up, Pete, they could blow them out by 20. If the offense shows up and they keep the ball away from the Patriots, I think that's the way it could go. But on the other hand, I really like the Cowboys to beat the New York Giants because of what you said. They've got that great defense. You've got Prescott playing great. You've got Elliott as well as Pollard just hammering with the runs and just running away from the Vikings. Yeah. So, I like them to win big. So if I had to, Pete, gun to my head, I'm going to say Cowboys by 17, and I'm going to say Vikings by 14.
Really? The Vikings by 14? Wow. That'll be interesting. We'll see.
I think the defense is shamed, and I think they come back fighting.
Yep. I'll tell you, Belichick is the defensive mind on that team, though, so that always is something that gets pretty interesting. The Vikings do want to bounce off of that terrible 40-3 loss to the Dallas Cowboys. John, it's rivalry week in college football. It's an awesome time. Everybody is playing their biggest rivals, right? And so it makes it really cool. But this one's kind of fun because it's the only college game on Thursday, and that is the Egg Bowl. Now, that sounds sort of silly. I get it, maybe, but it's the Egg Bowl. It's Ole Miss playing Mississippi State. So it's in-state rivalry. It's a monster game, and you got Lane
SWB
Kiffin
audio
as a
capture,
great coach
not
that's, by the
registered.
way, getting, courted by just about everybody, particularly Auburn, it seems. But and that should be a really fun game, John. And I look forward to it. And here's why. Basically, what Lane's done is he's decided he's more of a running kind of a coach these days. So they're running the football and they're having a lot of success doing so. You look over at Mississippi State, they've got a quarterback that nobody's talked about this entire year, John. He's got 32 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, got a great country name of Will Rogers. And the guy has been absolutely lights out, but they live and die by the throw, right? When you throw the ball, there are a couple things that can happen that aren't good. There's one thing that's really good. Then there's a couple things maybe not so great. So what do you think about this game going into that? And number 2, is Lane Kiffin going to be at Ole Miss next year, or is he going to be somewhere else? Is he going to be at Auburn? Is he going to be somewhere else? Is he going to be at Nebraska, where his dad played football? Monte Kiffin, who I played for, great guy. I mean, where's he going to go, or does he stay at Ole Miss?
I think he won't be able to resist the money, Pete. And the money down at Auburn is probably going to be extreme. I think other people will offer him a lot of money too. But he has built a great program down there. You're absolutely right. It's one of the first times he's done it with running, which is impressive, which means, that he can kind of do both sides. He's not just one way. Like you said before, sometimes you get like Sarkisian or some of these guys that are great quarterback coaches, but that usually means throwing the ball, 40 or 50 times a game. And like you said, a lot of bad things can happen. I like Lane to be perhaps down there in the SEC at Auburn, and I do think they'll break the bank to get this guy, Pete. These days, college coaches with that big money
SWB audio
coming next year,
capture,
Pete,
not
I think they're
registered.
going to be able to pay this guy $7 to $10 million a year, and that's just crazy money. But that's what's out there, and I don't know how you resist it. And I like the game. I do like the game this coming Thursday, tomorrow. I do like that game in the Egg Bowl.
Yep, and they got a great running back, this kid Junkins, who's got 16 touchdowns, John. The last thing I'll say is he's already making $7.5 million. So the money is going to be stacked up on his desk, and they're going to go, hey, man, how much do you need? 10, 11, 12? We're going to pay you more than Saban. I mean, it really could happen. So we'll see. But good for Lane. I'd love to see him at Nebraska. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be an exciting game tomorrow, Pete, both college and pro sides. And I'm really looking forward to some of the weekend games too. I know we don't do a show on Friday, but I think we might have to post up some of our observations into the weekend as well. Yeah. Folks, remember, you can join us in Miami. You can be live and in person with us trading for 2 days, December 8th through the 10th. Check it out by going to marketrebellion.com/Miami. That's marketrebellion.com/Miami. It makes a great Black Friday gift. And we will be back next week. Have a great one, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.
Have a good one.